Hello, hello, and welcome to Foundations. I am so excited to be able to share this framework with you today. We are diving into all things self-trust, how to deepen the connection that we have with our intuition, this part of ourself that deeply knows what we want, what is in our best self-interest, how to live in this path of alignment. For so many of us, our daily life can be rife with indecision and inner conflict, lack of clarity. And this workshop here is targeted to help mitigate some of that distraction and invite in the spaciousness for clarity to come through, to live in a more harmonious way of life. And it feels really special to be able to share this framework specifically because it is one that has been a pillar since day one of mine, one that I have turned to time and time again to build off of, and is a huge contributor of the clarity that I get to experience today from this understanding. So the ability to be able to share that with you feels really sacred and very special. So thank you so much for being here. And as we dive in, I would love to invite you to not get too caught up in note taking as we go through this presentation. That is definitely the tendency I tend to have when I am an audience member in workshops like these, is just writing down anything and everything that could be helpful. When what I have found to actually be the most productive way of integrating this information is listening to the presentation once all the way through and getting an understanding of what bigger picture is being painted for me here. What is all of this information culminating to? What are the claims that are going to be made to me? And taking that in the first time through and then going back to rewatch a second time. It's amazing how much more information you'll pick up the second time around once you have that big picture already in mind that you can refer to, of getting a better understanding of like where all the smaller bits of information fall into place, the purpose that they serve, and which ones stand out to you as a means of best integrating this information. Of course, I encourage you to have a journal and a pen nearby. So if it's something, jumps out at you, please, of course, feel free to write it down. This is an interactive workshop, so we all will be doing some writing throughout this process. But yeah, that's just my invitation for you to frame this conversation, and let's dive in. So I'm going to be making a claim that I'm going to be building this whole presentation off of, which is that we are always having an experience. We are inhabiting these bodies that are constantly being fed and given information from reality, from what we're experiencing around us. And the way that we relate to that information really colors the way that we see our reality of what's going on around us. And the two main ways that we filter through this information, that we make sense of our experience, is through thinking and feeling. We're almost always either thinking or feeling. And when these two big powerhouses of processing come together, they can either work together really harmoniously in a way that invites a lot of clarity and spaciousness and ease, in the way that we work with the world around us. Or what is most often the case is actually that there is some conflict, some collision there, some contradiction between what we think and what we're feeling. And that can cause a lot of disharmony in our experience, which can lead to, over time, lots of feelings of indecision, stagnation, self-resentment. If only I was better, then things wouldn't be this way. And the fact is that we are never taught how to make these two forces work together, how to make them cohesive. And that is a practice, that is a tangible skill that can be learned how to navigate. And that is the focus of this workshop, how to blend these two forms of understanding, of information processing together, so that our thoughts and our emotions can be on the same page and get to experience all the gifts that come with that. So this workshop is broken up into two parts. The first one is called Exploring Symmetries. This is the meat and the potatoes of the workshop, where we are going to be learning how to better understand and relate to our experience, and how to tap into our intuition to be in more steady connection with the part of us that just knows, and has so much clarity of what we're meant to do here. And the second part is where I'm going to be sharing two practices for subconscious exploration. So this is the part where we're going to need our journals and our pens, because we're going to be doing an activity together where you're going to be building out, fleshing out this template, two templates that you can build off of in the future and personalize it to the processes that you're moving through specifically. So with that being said, I would love to dive into the first part of this workshop, Exploring Symmetries. This is something I'm so excited to share with you. And before I do, there is an example that I'm going to be referring back to throughout the rest of this workshop to really highlight and personalize and drive home the claims that I'm making here, to see kind of like the tangibility of where they can serve us or get in our way in life. So I'm going to invite you to imagine with me that you have had a long week at work, and you have spent most of your Friday afternoon just daydreaming about getting out of there, going home, doing a relaxing, snuggly movie night with your partner to decompress and reconnect together. As you walk through the door to let him know your idea, he tells you, hey, the guys are going out tonight, and since you and I didn't have anything planned, I was going to go meet up with them. Is that cool with you? And your stomach drops, and your teeth clench. You're so tired, and you know you don't want to fight. But what happens next? I'm sure we can kind of brainstorm. There's a lot of different avenues that this could go into, and I'm going to be referring back to this situation to explore a couple of what those could look like and paths of best process moving forward. With that, we're going to dive into symmetries. This is a word that I've already referred to a couple of times in this workshop, and symmetries is the framework we're playing with today. Everything about the way that we navigate the world can be organized into symmetries. A classic example of this is that I'm sure we have all heard of is lightness and dark, that you can't know light without dark. So imagining if we lived in a world that was only light all the time, there wasn't even shadows, we would not be able to juxtapose lightness against anything to be able to gain relativity to make it observable to us. If that was just an ever-present running constant in our lives, we wouldn't be able to see it without a juxtaposition. So you need dark to be able to recognize what lightness is. There's a really cute story I heard once that I think runs this point home pretty well, is where a penguin meets a fish, and the penguin says, "This water is so cold today." And the fish says, "What water?" And the reason for this being is the fish has only known its experience to be under the water. All it's ever known is water. It has nothing to juxtapose it against, whereas the penguin has experienced life in the water and life on land with the air. And it has these two different differences to be able to juxtapose against, to recognize this is air and this is water. The fish has never had that, and the fish has nothing to juxtapose against and can't recognize that it's in water without that juxtaposition. So symmetries is a really beautiful framework to not only just, in a grand practical sense, but specifically in the self-help world, that this works in a very similar way of when you are out of balance and something you can recognize is no longer serving you, that there is a symmetrical opposite, there is an observable opposite that you can lean into to kind of counterbalance that disharmony and find yourself in that more balanced central path. So an example I have here is people pleasing. If you notice that this is something that you struggle with, where it's actually starting to cause some discomfort in your life, you're feeling a little resentful of this tendency, So what we know to be true about people pleasing is that it is a very others-centric behavior, that we're always putting others above ourselves, trying to make other people feel comfortable, going above and beyond for others. So what is the observable inverse, the symmetrical opposite, the counterbalance for people pleasing? Well, if people pleasing is very other-centric, that would be self-centric, self-ownership, prioritizing the needs of the self, putting yourself first, selfishness on that opposite side of the spectrum. So if you notice that you are out of balance in one way, you can learn to use this framework of symmetries. Okay, what is my opposite then? What am I being invited to lean into that's going to pull me back into the state of balance, pull me back into the state of harmony, where I can balance practicing meeting the needs of others as well as needs of myself and finding this sustainable central path, which is really the goal of self-development, is this steady state of being regulated, being in flow with the world around us. So the takeaway for this page, anything that is observable must have an inverse for it to be observable. And like I touched on a little bit earlier, if you're experiencing imbalance, it's this practice of learning to look at the other side of the pendulum for your answer, what you're being asked to lean into, to pull yourself out of that disharmony and come back to this place of balance instead. So another quick example I have here is anger. If you're quick to anger, you find you're really irritable with other people. To me, when I was thinking about what words come up for me for the inverse of anger, I thought of softness, I thought of compassion. So if you can find a way to invite in those things when you're noticing, okay, I might have this anger problem that's kind of getting in my way here, inviting in compassion for the other person, inviting in compassion for yourself creates that spaciousness to kind of like lessen the sting of that anger and put you more in that control seat so that you can respond to these situations in a productive way. So being in this steady stream of balance is being in alignment with your intuition, is having such a good understanding of yourself, and there's so much cohesion that is working together within your system, that you are in flow with the natural order of the world around you, which creates so much more harmony and ease in the way that we get to move through our day and move through our life. And like we mentioned at the beginning of this, what are the two big heavy hitters about the way that we process the world around us? Those are thoughts and our emotions. So these are two big players of the game that are going to dictate how much harmony you get to experience throughout your day, how well your cognitive mind and your emotional intelligence can work together, instead of contradicting and bumping up against one another. So firstly, we're going to be diving into what exactly is cognitive intelligence and getting at some clarity around what is your relationship with this. Are you someone who might lean really heavy and have some dysfunction on leaning too hard on your cognitive understanding? Or do you find dysfunction in the other direction where actually this is something I really struggle to practice and I might be being invited to learn how to play with this more? So diving right on into it, cognitive intelligence is a really special and incredibly necessary tool in helping us navigate reality as humans. That this is something that really helps us stand apart from the animal kingdom. This is brain-based decision making. This is the part of us that is really good at planning, applying logic, understanding sequence and progression. The parts of us that know how to enact discipline when things might feel hard, but we know we need to do them, showing up and getting things done. This is the type of intelligence that our society is really shaped around. If we think about what it means in the Western world to be a productive member of society or a good worker, it's someone who can be very decisive, very black and white, very logical, who knows how to get things done, boom, 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 in like this clear-cut way, right? And yeah, this is the part of us that is just great at complex problem solving, long-term planning, risk assessment. This is what I would consider to be Western society's most highest valued form of intelligence. This is one that I think it's really common for a lot of us to actually lean a little bit too heavy on because it is what our society tends to reward and motivate us to lean into more often than not. So an example of what it looks like if you were to use your cognitive intelligence or cognitive discipline to solve a project that you got put in charge of at work, what that could look like is just this very sequential, logical plan of success. So identify what is the goal of this project, what are any potential roadblocks I'm going to run into, coming up with a plan for success, navigating those roadblocks, and then this disciplined execution of that plan. I'm going to invite you to take about 30 seconds here to think of a time that you were recently guided by your cognitive intelligence. When was the time that you were able to use logic or understanding progress or sequence, discipline to make a decision, to solve a problem, to show up in a situation? So yeah, I'll give you a little bit of time to brainstorm an example that comes to you to just really, personalize some of this information of like, I really understand what it looks like for me to show up in my cognitive intelligence and what that looks like to me. And if you're not totally sure where you fall in line with your relationship with your cognitive intelligence, I want to show kind of like what it might look like if you're someone who leans a little too heavy on this, or if you're someone who is out of balance in the other direction, to get some familiarity of where you personally stand here. So if you're someone who might lean a little too heavy on your cognitive intelligence, cognitive discipline in making decisions about your life and showing up for your day, you might be familiar with feelings of burnout, fatigue, experiencing a lack of fulfillment when you accomplish your goals, that when you get an award or you accomplish something you've worked really hard for, there's a sense of emptiness behind it where you're not feeling very emotionally attached to what you've just done, and it can feel kind of numb or empty. However, if you're someone who leans on the other side, for actually being disciplined is something you might really struggle with, and that logical sequence of follow through can be something that doesn't always work out for you. You might be familiar with feelings of aimlessness or purposelessness. You might really struggle with following through when you make a plan, of actually sticking to it, struggling to achieve your goals, instability and unpreparedness, almost this feeling of being caught off guard by the consequences of your actions, of that lack of being able to see down the line, or practicing that forethought can catch you off guard and, potentially get you stuck in some sticky situations that could have been preventable. So something you might notice here actually looking at this table is maybe you kind of fit into both parts of like, I definitely feel burnout and lack of fulfillment in my goals, but also I really struggle to just stay disciplined in what it is that I want to do. And that is also an option here. So we can have people who lean a little too heavy on their cognitive discipline, people who pretty consistently struggle with this. But then there's also a group of people who can swing from extremes, who are just lack that regulating ability to kind of stay in that central path. So they'll just swing from one side to the other, leaning too hard into the cognition and then too hard into the emotional. So that could be a possibility for you as well. What we're aiming for is that central steady stream of balance, being able to hold both and lean on both, and know when things get a little out of balance in one direction, we know how to counteract that, and we know what we're being asked to lean into to bring us back into that central column. So I'd love to invite you to write 1 or 2 sentences about just based off of this information, how you feel you relate to your cognitive discipline. Which side of the chart do you resonate with more? Do you resonate with both? Where do you feel like you fit in on this scale? Something else that I think is really interesting to note is that I mentioned earlier, the Western world is really focused around rewarding people who lean a little bit too heavy on their cognitive discipline to get through life. These are considered to be, the types of people who are the most productive members of society. They're the easiest to work with, most productive. And the long-term effects of that is, as a society of people who are living their life consistently out of balance in this way, is a lot of us are on the straight shot to a midlife crisis of when we are always turning to logic for all of our decision making, of having this obsession with always taking the next right step instead of checking in with what we really want to be doing, just doing instead what is expected of us societally to do. As well as pushing through, pushing through to succeed, despite signals from the body asking us to slow down, stop, and rest. Causes a lot of people, when they're 3 decades into their career of all that they've worked up to this culminating point, realizing how empty it all feels, and there's this lack of emotional connection to what they have spent their lives working toward. Even if they have accomplished a lot, there's just no emotional connection to it that means anything to them. And what is so interesting is, because our society, Western society, rewards this type of behavior, and the effects of this is a midlife crisis, is that midlife crises is strictly a Western problem. No other places around the world experience that lack of emotional connectivity to our accomplishments in the way that we do. So coming back to our example here of the boyfriend who, just wants to go hang out with his friends on that Friday night. If you're someone who leans a little bit heavier on your cognitive discipline, what that might look like in the way that you choose to respond to this situation is that you're going to know you don't want to fight. Really tired. So the easiest thing you can do is just avoid the conflict entirely, deny that there's an issue, suppressing that emotional response, ignoring the fact that your body actually has something to say and actually cares about the situation, repressing that down, and instead of saying something like, yep, sure, that's what you want to do, that's fine with me, putting on that forced smile and never acknowledging the truth of how you really feel. So to wrap up this chapter on our cognition, is remembering that this is an incredible tool. This is something that has helped humans succeed wildly in the ways that we have. And it is necessary to master for well-rounded development. But remembering, as it relates to symmetries, is that this is only 50% of the picture. Of course, an important 50%, but there is another side of this that deserves just as much respect and reverence as a form of intelligence as we do over here in the ways that we relate to our cognition and our brain. Symmetry is key for balance. Too much of anything is the beginning of a mess. So what is on the other side of our cognitive intelligence is our emotions, our emotional intelligence. The fact is that we have a nervous system that is central to our biology. And this is something that runs so heavily in the background. Our subconscious is a huge filter for us in making sense of the world around us. This shapes so much of the way that we perceive the world. And because our society really neglects this part of our being, most often this gets totally left unaddressed by the general public, of just letting it run in the background, being in so much control of their actions. Just most of us have no awareness that this is going on or know how to relate to this type of intelligence. And I would love to change that conversation of recognizing your body has so much intelligence, just as much, 50% of the conversation, as your brain, of what it can offer you in terms of how to navigate your reality. So this is body-based decision making. This is checking in with yourself to see, how is my body responding to the dynamics I'm a part of, the friendships that I'm in, the decisions that I'm making, and trusting the information that you're getting from your body, that this is something that deserves to be part of the conversation. This is a beautiful directional marker for authentic satisfaction. If I can do things that make me feel good and I'm around people that my body is positively responding to, that is the gateway for living a life that you can develop an emotional connection to, where there's so much meaning, so much purpose, so much connection that you're just not going to get if you're leaning consistently on your brain to make all your decisions for you. That this is a beautiful part of the picture we get to play in as well. So an example of what that can look like is say that you are talking in a group of people and you're in the middle of making a point that you're really excited about, and somebody cuts you off while you're talking. And you're going to feel this contraction in your chest. You're going to feel like some fire, some anger burning up into the back of your throat, like a little, what just happened? Like you're having a very emotional response. Your body is giving you a lot of information about, like, we didn't like that. That is a sign from your body to you that you need to stand up for yourself, show up for yourself. Of course, you can do it in a way that is full of kindness and respect, but that is something not to be ignored, that your body wants you to protect your energy, protect your space, and show up for yourself to let someone know, like, I deserve to take up space here. I deserve respect in that conversation. And, just a means of letting them know that their action wasn't received well, whether that is telling them in the moment, actually, I wasn't finished, taking them to the side after the conversation, to just let them know, like, I kind of felt like you cut me off in there. I just want to clear the air real quick. Or inviting in some spaciousness with that compassion we referenced earlier as a good counterbalance for anger, to help you be more in the control seat, to invite in more of that symmetry of, like, okay, how do I want to respond to this, instead of just being driven by the anger. So we'd love to invite you to take some time here to write an example of a time that you were guided by your emotional intelligence, where you got this reaction from your body, this sign from your body that you need to do something. You need to show up in some kind of way. You need to say something on behalf of yourself, to see how you relate to it. What's an example that comes up for you to really personalize and integrate some of this information? We have another chart. Our emotional intelligence, if you're someone who leans on this a lot in your life, you could say it's kind of run by emotion. This is not a great place to be either. You are likely to be familiar with feelings of indecision, just lack of clarity around what it is that you really want, that there's just like a lot of information there that you're getting lost in. Regrettable actions, if we can become people who act before we think and end up regretting the things that we do or say in hindsight. We can be impulsive. We might struggle to let things go and instead just kind of like wallowing and getting lost in the story of our emotion. You're someone who struggles to connect and respect your emotional intelligence. You might be feeling things like a lack of connection to your accomplishments, to people in your life, some emptiness or numbness when good things do happen to you, and potentially some resentment toward yourself. Maybe the story of, if I was just better, then I wouldn't feel this way, or potentially resentment to other people who have the things that you were deeply searching for. And a lot of times not even being consciously aware that that's why you're resentful of them, but there is something in your body that recognizes they have what I want, and I don't like that they have it, and I can't figure out how to get it. That resentment can build in that way too. So again, taking a look to see, where do you fit on this chart? Which column feels more resonant to you, or do you still feel like you're someone who is a big swinger here of the extremes? Just writing down a sentence or two. How do you relate to this information? And coming back to our running example here of our Friday night boyfriend situation, if you are someone who leans really heavily into your emotional intelligence, you can cognitively know that you don't want to fight, you're tired, you've had a long week. You can also cognitively know, like, at this point, your boyfriend hasn't done anything wrong. He's just trying to communicate with you. But the frustration that you feel building in the back of your throat is just building, eventually causing you to snap, and triggers you to yell at your partner, to lose it, and say something along the lines of, wow, like, we haven't connected all week, and the moment that we can, you decide that you'd rather see your friends instead. Cool, whatever. Leaving the room, stomping away, slamming the door, acting in a way that in hindsight we probably wouldn't be very proud of, because we are just lost in the story and the swirl of that big emotional response. So wrapping up, understanding our relationship to our emotions is that emotions deserve to be part of the conversation. They deserve to be respected as a form of intelligence. and they give us valuable information all the time for us. This is information that is from us, it's coming from our body, that is for us, information for you, about you. And learning how to respect that intelligence and invite that to be part of the conversation in your decision-making process without being ruled by it. Now remember, this is 50% of the picture. We are striving for balance, but the brain gets to be here too to step in and talk about what is, a logical approach here versus our, the emotions of how the body is responding. I have this really beautiful chart here that I am so in love with, of just really, it just really shows in a pictographic way the balance and the symmetry here between these two things. I'm going to let you go ahead and read it on your own, but it's this really beautiful structure of like how these two things really work together and hold each other's hands, that these are the symmetrical opposites that govern so much of the way that we experience the world. And having relationship with both, having respect and reverence for both is just imperative. And like I've said, what we're striving for is hitting this middle point. This point of perfect balance is always the name of the game, what we're striving for. That is hitting the point of your intuitive balance, where you're able to really move in symphonic flow with the world around you, that you are just getting, life can feel more easeful, more clear, decisions to you can come more quickly, more naturally, with more ease, is the goal. It is the goal. So our intuition is the spark point, the part of ourselves that just deeply knows, she knows what is meant for us, what we really want. This is feeling that is beyond emotion. This is a deep sense of knowing beyond the brain. This is just a really deeply rooted part of ourselves that we can only really hear and develop a consistent relationship with when the clutter and the clashing between thoughts and emotions has been separated and there is cohesion, there is peace here and calmness here between the two. That's when we can really strengthen our connection with our intuition. Some examples in the natural world of what intuition can look like, because animals are the perfect models for us, as they don't have ego of what it looks like to be in steady connection with your intuition. So things like migration patterns, animals are never told, it's the middle of November, now is the time where we start walking in this direction and we're aiming to get to this place. It's just this response from the body, this deeper intelligence that guides them to where they're going to be most successful to live. Animals responding to natural disasters, feeling the flux of pressure in the air to just know, like, where is it that I need to go? Something's going to happen. Animals just kind of like drifting into higher elevation to protect themselves before a natural disaster happens, far before, humans can recognize that something's going on, is a really beautiful demonstration of, the benefits of having that really deep connection to the intuition and letting yourself move with life, instead of, struggling a little bit more with that. So what it looks like when you are in deep connection with your intuition, this is all something that we have experienced at some points in our lives. Here is, say you lose just hours of your afternoon being immersed in a creative project. Your thoughts are just dialed in on this project. You're emotionally invested in how it turns out, and you can just be so lost working with the creative expression of the universe that just hours go by, but felt timeless to you. The flow of a good conversation is another really beautiful example. When you're in a great conversation with someone, you can notice that you are not cognitively thinking about what it is that you want to say next. You are more of just a conduit of letting that information or that perspective, whatever it is you're sharing, to move through you. It's just dropping in and moving through you. And you're kind of just like watching these words come out of your mouth without you having to really consciously think about what it is that you're saying. That exchange just gets to feel so effortless. Other examples, knowing a decision before really having to think about it, having gut feelings about people or situations, all examples of getting these intuitive hits. So for the last time, I would invite you to write down a recent example of the time that you felt guided by your intuition, where you got this this feeling of like, I just kind of know this about someone and I couldn't really explain why, or, maybe getting lost in that creative project as an expression of your intuition as well, but just writing down something about the way that you can relate. So if you were to approach this situation with the boyfriend, having this really calm, collected relationship with your intuition, you could cognitively know that you don't want to fight. You could recognize, I'm having an emotional response here that deserves to be acknowledged. You take a deep breath and say, I know we didn't have plans together this evening, but I had hoped you and I could spend some time together anyway. I'd love to come up with a plan that works for us both. And that conversation could take many different avenues of what that gets to look like for both people to walk away happy and satisfied. But it is taking in this balance of like, I don't want to fight, so I'm not going to. I'm going to make this a conversation so we can problem solve together, not having this emotional response and getting carried away, acting without really thinking it through, but, putting yourself on the same side of the conflict as your partner, the person that you're figuring this out with, of like, hey, can you help me solve this together? No blame, no name calling or anything, just keeping it conversational. So if you are connected with your intuition, this is a really beautiful way that we can check in and organize our life to see like what is in alignment for us, what is out of balance, where can I be invited to take a deeper look about the way that I'm moving through the world. So if you are deeply connected with that intuitive state of being, all or most areas of life can bring you a sense of peace and ease and joy. They might not be in their final form of what it is that you're working towards, but you have this sense of calmness of like, I'm at least on the path I want to be on to get to a place that is going to feel really great for me to be. Decisions are made with ease. They might not always be fast, but there is an easefulness about it of like, just give me enough time and I know I'm going to come to a decision that I'm really happy with. And this balance between discipline and creative expression, dabbling in both. So I have a little activity for us to do to kind of do a quick little assessment of like, where do I stand in my relationship with these areas of my life? I have 8 listed down here. If you can think of any others beyond the scope of this, of course, feel free to add them to your list. But we're just going to do a quick run through and notice the way that we are responding to these areas of our life, which feel aligned with your intuition, which feel really good, that when you really think about, the trajectory of your career, the daily habits that you have, is this something that you feel excited about, that you are proud of, that you feel good about, that really represents the life you want to live? Or is there like a little bit of a closing, a little bit of a clench, a little bit of like, this could be better? Of those that you feel like you would want to make some improvement upon, taking a moment to check in and practice with yourself of like, is this a part of my life I lean a little too heavy on my cognitive discipline to make decisions off of? Or is this a part where I'm really being ruled by my emotions and they're kind of holding me back at this point? So going through, just making, writing down these 8 sections and then checking to yourself which ones feel we're on the right path, we like where we're going, which ones aren't, diving inward. Where am I being invited to lean into more? Am I a little bit too cognitive on these things or too emotional? So if you want to pause the video here to do that, please do. So we are on to part 2, where we're going to be diving into tools for development, personal refinement, self-growth. So yeah, we have 2 tools we're going to go through. The first one is called a higher self outline. Second one is a parts map. Higher self outline is a tool really for people who might be a little bit too governed by their emotionality. It's going to be helpful for anyone, but this is a really great tool you can lean on when you kind of know you're in the throes of your emotion and you need some to build up that self-discipline muscle. So we're going to dive into that. First here, we have 4 sections to designing our higher self. And the reason why a framework like this is so incredibly helpful is that it's very simple, it is very straightforward, but it is simply the act of linguistically articulating to yourself what it is you're working towards, forcing yourself to clarify your goal does so much in helping you actually integrate that as a goal. So, for example, if you were to say, like, oh, I want to get healthy this year, and you leave it at that, when you refer to that goal as, a time where you're like just really not feeling like going to the gym or eating something healthy, and you want to lean on that discipline to help you make the right choice in alignment with the goal that you really want, if we just say, like, oh, I just really wanted to be healthier, that feels very fuzzy in our articulation. And it's really hard for us to be able to grasp at that and use that as a tangible piece of evidence to help us sway our decision making. Whereas when we have a lot of clarity, we've really clarified to ourselves, this is exactly the way that I want to show up. This is exactly the way that I want to go about solving these types of issues in my life, makes it that much easier for us to grab onto and be like, yeah, this is what I said I wanted. This is the exact opportunity for me to be showing up in this way. Helps it be a much more decisive process for us. I heard a statistic once, I don't remember the number of, but it was, it's just some crazy percent higher or more likely chance of you achieving your goals through simply the act of writing it down. Not even writing it down to refer to it at a later date or every day, but just writing it down, just that articulation to self of what exactly it is you're working towards does so much in helping us achieve that. So we're applying that here to just who's the person you want to be? Really clarifying, what am I working towards? So we have our 4 categories here. The first one I think is the most fun to play with, which is just your outward appearance. How do you want to present this version of yourself to the world? How does she show up? What is the energy that she gives off? How does she show the world, like, this is the type of person I am? Really helping us embody the character traits that the physical manifestation can represent to us. Next part is our habits and routines. How does this person spend their day? What are the consistent practices that they use to keep themselves in the vibrational state that we're striving for? How do they start the day, end the day? How do they nourish their body? How do they treat their health? Things like that. Next is our persona. Who is this person in conflict? How does she show up when she receives gifts and success into her life? What is the self-talk that goes on in her inner dialogue, her inner experience? What is it that she embodies as a person? What do you feel when you're around her? Clarifying that can be such a fun place to play. Lastly is our out in the world section. In your best case scenario, what does work-life balance really look like to you? Where would you love to live and spend most of your time? What career or way of giving back to the world would light you up to have? What are the ways that you spend your free time? What are the hobbies that you enjoy doing? That would, bring some vibrancy and some positivity into your life. How do you want that to look? So I'm going to invite you to pause here, set aside some time maybe over the weekend to really dive into this. I have a whole Google Doc outlining this in the more detail, the better, to really articulate to yourself, like, this is what I'm working towards. So in those moments where, it feels really hard to show up for yourself, you're going to have this to lean on as this articulation of, like, this is exactly what I want to show up as, making it that much easier to follow through, to show up for yourself. And with that, we're going to move on to tool 2, which is making a parts map. This is for the type of person who can lean a little bit too heavy on their cognitive discipline and struggle to relate to their emotional intelligence. So this is a beautiful tool that I use all the time in helping me extract information from what my body is trying to communicate to me. This is the go-to tool. So we have 4 parts that work in a sequential order. So we're going to start with triggers. Triggers are things that can happen to us that cause us to have these reactions that are very strong and out of character for us. So anything that kind of leads to this, like, feeling like a loss of control or loss of, sense of self, there's a huge range of what, triggers could be for people. I've listed some really common ones here just to get the ball rolling. So things like conflict or confrontation, unexpected attention, like being put on the spot, external pressure, feelings of overwhelm, feelings of neglect or rejection. When we experience these things or put into these situations, it can cause this very like out of body experience where we're just having these really strong reactions that when we look back on, we're like, I don't really know why I did that. So clarifying to yourself what are your triggers, because your triggers are responses from your body telling you like this is a part of your life that really needs to be addressed. This is something I want you to look at. And so being able to articulate, the themes of like what is central to our triggers is so important. Once we have some familiarity with what our triggers are, the next step here is our protectors. And the protectors are the part of us that will come online when we are triggered to protect the vulnerable parts of self. So the protectors are a part of us that was developed out of necessity, out of a time in our lives where we felt really vulnerable and we just did not know how to meet our emotional needs, or the people around us who were supposed to meet those needs for us were unable to. So protectors are a really beautiful part of ourselves that we owe so much gratitude for being there for us when we really needed them. And our goal is to work through the need to have them anymore. So I'm going to be showing you a list. This is not a comprehensive list, just some protectors that I see often, that I'm familiar with. They're pretty self-descriptive. So when you take a look at this list, just kind of seeing like what are the ones that jump out at you. Yeah, I definitely have a tendency to do this when I'm in this and I'm in a triggered state. So some really common ones are an avoider, a controller, hyper aware, just really, noticing what other people are thinking about, how they're reacting, what's their body language like. Perfectionist, people pleasing, projecting like your own baggage onto them, like they must be thinking this about me because you're really thinking about it yourself. Just taking a look at this list, maybe picking out 3 to start that really jump out at you, like, oh, I definitely do these things when I'm triggered, as a means to self-soothe. So these protectors come in as a means of trying to protect a part of us, a really vulnerable, sweet little part of us who feels a lack of, there's always some emotional need at the bottom of why a protector gets developed. So the protector comes in to protect this really vulnerable part of us who is looking to have some emotional need met. And the really beautiful gift of this parts map is being able to identify in this, very progressive sequential process, what is it that you need? What is it that your body is asking for at the bottom of it all? And you get to be the person today who can meet those emotional needs. So you're no longer this, really vulnerable child who had to lean on others to feel okay. But instead, I get to give these things to myself now. I get to repair my own nervous system. I get to take my emotional ownership back. It's a really beautiful process. So just like looking through when you pick out your protectors and sitting with, okay, there's a part of me who, like, what would feel so good for me to have right now that would help this protector feel like, okay, things are fine and I don't need to be here anymore. Again, not a comprehensive list. You can think about, what is it that would feel great to you? I put safety as a bunch of asterisks next to it because this is the most common one. If your nervous system doesn't feel safe, it is just going to be triggering into that sympathetic response, which is where the protectors are coming online for. So that one is a pretty one that runs under the current for a lot of these. I have listed some of the most common emotional needs as they relate to protectors over here with the numbers. For like the 17th time, this is not, finality, please plug and play with whatever feels good to you. It does not have to be what I have listed here, but it's just to get the ball rolling if you're feeling kind of stuck of like, maybe this is one I can try on and see how this lands with me. Yeah, this is it. No, it's something else. Just ideas to sit with. So yeah, parts mapping is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful practice of just making sense of your emotionality, having a framework to input whatever it is that you're dealing with, what the trigger is, what you're noticing your responses, and extracting really relevant and helpful information from. It's super helpful. It's something I use all the time, even today. So I believe that wraps it up for me here. If you found this to be impactful information to you and you're looking to continue that conversation or explore how it relates to you and really you feel ready to pull apart what you've got going on under the hood to really clear out your stuff and you're ready to make sense of it, to step into the person you know you want to be, I have an invitation for you. I'm going to be offering 10 spots of a 1 hour one-on-one coaching session with me. You can bring anything to the table of what it is you want to take a closer look at and work on. And there are no strings attached, no obligations here. It is completely free. The purpose of this is just really helping people get their foot in the door to experience what somatic work has to offer. The benefits are just tremendously endless, and it's an incredibly, incredibly impactful, profound healing modality that I feel so blessed to be able to share. And I would love to be part of that process for you if it feels good. So I'm going to be running this for the next 2 weeks. I have a QR code here that you can scan that'll take you right to a scheduling page. There's a lot of time flexibility, so you just need to click on the time that feels best for you. And then shortly after, I will send you a Zoom link for that meeting. So with that, I'll leave you there. Please let me know in the comments how this information landed with you. I'm, again, so sorry I couldn't do this live, but I so appreciate your flexibility, and I'm glad, I still got to share what I had here. Or you can send me a message on Instagram if you have any questions. Feel free to let me know. But that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world that I get to share this information that has been so transformative for me with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye.